I mean, the three of us have been fighting for freedom and liberty for several weeks now, but it seems to be just the three of us, which is very unfortunate here in a Republican-controlled state. It's very disconcerting that, one, the massive overreach of government for our health care, it should be between a doctor and a patient, and certainly not government.
Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Conversations That Matter. I'm your host, Alex Newman for the New American Magazine. Thank you so much for tuning in. And folks, we have an incredibly significant issue happening right now. You're almost not going to believe your ears with what we're going to talk about today. This radical expansion of mental health, government mental health programs in the state of Georgia. You know, people normally think of Georgia as pretty conservative, pretty reliably Republican state. But this is just incredible. So we have three very special guests with us today to talk about this. The bill just went through the House of Representatives there. So we've got Representative Sherri Gilligan, we've got Representative Charlice Byrd, and Representative Philip Singleton. They all stood against this bill. It's called HB 1013, passed through the House in Georgia and is now heading to the Senate. It already has support from the governor, the lieutenant governor, and it was supported by the Speaker of the House. Folks, pay close attention. You're going to struggle to believe all this, but I can guarantee you, if they're working on this in Georgia, if it's not in your state yet, it's coming there soon. Representatives, thank you so much for joining us. If you would, could you start us off just with an overview of what this bill does?
Okay, so yeah, in essence, it's a government control of healthcare. So we already know that Obamacare inserted the government in every decision that is made insurance-wise, right? We had all these mandates. So now we're demanding parity with our mental health insurance coverage. So if you provide any kind of medical health insurance, you must now provide mental health insurance at what they define as parity. That's one thing that it does. So it's a huge government overreach in our insurance companies, in our insurance plans. It will necessarily skyrocket our insurance premiums to cover all of these things. It also gives a lot of latitude to confining a person involuntarily. So it has already lowered some of the things that would today be considered normal or abnormal. Well, that bar gets lowered because we're pointing to this new document, this DSM-5 document. We could go into that at some great length. But now, without being an imminent danger to oneself or to someone else, you can be involuntarily confined. And I don't have the exact wording. I'd have to get the exact wording. Oh, I do have it in front of me. A reasonable expectation that a significant psychiatric deterioration will occur in the near future.
Wow. And there's going to be a big incentive too. Huh? There's big dollar signs attached to telling somebody they're mentally ill and they need to be confined. Oh my goodness. That's incredible.
Right. And if it's in the near future, and that's not necessarily defined at all, and you've ever had some kind of an emotional disease diagnostic in the past, then how easy will it be to say, well, you could have a deterioration in the near future. We need to keep you. You haven't committed a crime. Actually, as a matter of fact, that one police chief was saying that he necessarily wants it to be before you commit a crime that you can be detained, that you could lose some of your civil liberties.
So pre-crime, huh? You don't even have to do anything wrong. But I mean that just sounds unbelievable. I mean, okay, a relative dies. Well, my psychiatric state may deteriorate as a result of sadness from a relative dying. Well, okay, now under this law, it sounds like we could be in some trouble. I want to talk too about this expansion of the insurance. I understand that now even churches are going to be, if they provide health insurance or whatever to their employees, they may be roped into paying for gender reassignment things. What's the deal with that? What is this going to do to the insurance coverage that people in Georgia are going to be able to get?
Yeah, so it's one of the most insidious parts of the bill, but essentially what it's doing is, first it's mandating that every psychiatric condition is covered, and what we've done is this bill abdicates the authority instead of the state defining, heart disease or child obesity or whatever condition they want treated. They've abdicated the authority for those conditions completely to this DSM-5 document, which is currently managed by the World Health Organization in association. That they get a lot of their definitions from the APA, which is the American Psychological Association. So essentially, it's as you can imagine, it tends to be a very left-leaning organization, and we have a tendency in our country, as we've seen with COVID already, that a lot of times the medical bureaucracy likes to go ahead and force new definitions and new treatments on the American people. Well, what we've done with this legislation is saying that anything that's in the DSM-5 that's defined as a mental condition, such as pedophilia, actually in the DSM-5, pedophilia, you have to have committed acts against children to meet the definition criteria. But in this case, now we'd be required by law, the insurance agency, or if they're a Medicaid or Medicare, they'd be required to have treatment and seek counseling and stuff like that. We're sending them to a counselor instead of the criminal justice system. And so it's a complete, in my opinion, manipulation of the system. But the problem is, if I'm a local if I run a local church, or I run a nonprofit organization and I have healthcare, I'm providing healthcare to my employees, their premiums are going to go up because of Obamacare, frankly, and that's still in place. And so now this is mandating on top of that. And if there's someone with gender dysphoria, which is a psychological condition, and the DSM-5, an acceptable method of treating gender dysphoria is gender reassignment surgery. And so now the insurance company would be required to cover that gender reassignment surgery, which we know the way insurance works is that cost is going to be split amongst all people under that insurance provider. And so now, in essence, you're going to be forced to cover those insurance costs for those types of things. And so it's a gross overstep of government reach. It's a gross overstep and something that we should all be throwing our hands up. And just as a side note, we've got lots of friends in DC in the U.S. Freedom Caucus, and the Democrats in DC are salivating over this bill because it's been passed almost unanimously by a Republican state legislature, which anytime that you're in 100% agreement, every Democrat voted for this legislation. Whenever Republicans are in agreement with Democrats on healthcare policy, something is seriously off at rocker. And so the Democrats are excited because they see this as their best hope for expanding Medicare and Medicaid in 2022.
Folks, I hope you're processing this. Okay. We're talking about now allowing pedophiles to go into mental health instead of jail. Right. We're talking about forcing churches. We're talking about forcing Christian ministries to fund, sex changes for people who claim they were born in the wrong body. The DSM, and I've talked to psychiatrists about this publicly. I've had psychiatrists tell me there's literally no person walking on this planet today who could not be classified under one of these definite. They've got oppositional defiance disorder. If a kid talks back to their parents, everybody could theoretically fall under one of these things. The pharmaceutical companies will have a nice big paycheck from the taxpayers as they medicate all of these children. And it sounds like, folks, the Democrats love this. Representative Byrd, share with us some of your concerns, if you would, about some of the other elements of this legislation before it heads on over to the Georgia Senate.
Well, certainly it talks about a lot of our children in the schools and taking over their health care, where they could possibly be sent to the principal's office. A counselor takes over for those children and does not even call a parent about the issue. They will start taking care of the children right there on their campus. These are scary things that are going on. The three of us have been fighting for freedom and liberty for several weeks now, but it seems to be just the three of us, which is very unfortunate here in a Republican-controlled state. It's very disconcerting that the massive overreach of government for our health care, it should be between a doctor and a patient and certainly not government.
Yeah. And folks, for those of you who are wondering how Republicans in Georgia could be on board with this, remember, Governor Kemp is, of course, the one that Trump has been speaking out against for a number of years. And there's so much going on here. Now, I want to talk about the gun control aspect too. If I understand correctly, this is really another backdoor for gun control. This kind of lowers the threshold for being stripped of your rights guaranteed in your Second Amendment. If you're just labeled with one of these labels, you might find yourself in hot water if you own firearms. Could one of you address that issue?
Right. So as I said, if you get labeled, and it's very easy to get labeled, remember, it's just a significant psychiatric deterioration will occur in the near future. Well, if you are labeled in such a way, then you can't carry a gun. You're an unlawful weapons carrier at that point because you have an active mental illness. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Correct.
So this is definitely a backdoor way. Now, remember, there are people who have said things that gets labeled as misinformation by every social media outlet out there. We're not allowed to think these things, say these things. At what point do these things that we think and say get labeled as a mental disorder? Do remember also that mental disorders are defined by societal norms.
That's right.
So who gets to define the societal norms? Well,
I think that's so critical what you just said.
Yeah.
What you just said, Representative, I think this is something that people don't really understand. I did a deep dive into the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, and I was astounded when I found out that these are not like objective criteria. Like you go into the doctor and your bone is broken, they do an x-ray, you see the broken bone and you fix it. These guys actually get together and they vote on these things. They say, well, we think this ought to be a disease, or we think these would be the symptoms of this alleged disease. I mean, this is just astounding. And now these people are going to have these massive powers over the lives of every person in the state of Georgia. And it looks like especially children are going to be targeted here. I understand this bill is going to be creating mental health courts. Like you mentioned, Representative Byrd, is going to be going into the schools. Now, one of the elements that has been brought to my attention is this whole child, whole community, this so-called wraparound service for children and their families, where these medical clinics are going to be coming into the schools. We already have, according to psychiatrists that I've talked to, a massive over medication of our children. They're calling all these little boys ADD or ADHD if they bounce around a lot. I got 5 bouncy boys, I'll get near a psychiatrist. But what is this going to do to children in schools? What is this going to do to parental rights, to the authority of the family, to just, behaviors that historically have been considered totally normal among children? What are we looking at here if this makes it all the way through?
Well, it's the scary answer to your question is we don't have any idea. It's a complete push. I've got 4 kids in school right now, from 18 down to 11, and the push from the left has been to take over your parental role in that child's life. It's their education now. It's their health care. I mean, they're darn near taking. The President Biden last year was trying to pay to help you raise your kids too. I mean, it's a complete overhaul of our social systems, and part of that is because they have been targeting the family for almost a generation now, and to destroy the family. The last best piece of destroying the family is make sure that whatever single parent is left in that 70% of households nowadays are single parent households. Now make sure that parent is no longer the provider of anything for that child. They don't provide. Some of these schools are doing year round 3 meals a day to these children, and you look at it and you're like, well, I'm glad we're feeding hungry children. But we don't think about the societal destruction that's happening and the erosion of the family. And this mental health bill is just a great example. The red flag law aspect that you just touched on a second ago, it's insidious because you could take in, like, let's say a state like Georgia, where we're working on constitutional carry. We're trying hard to pass that. Well, you go and you pass constitutional carry and you change it to lawful weapon owner in the definition, but then you pass a bill that essentially allows everyone in the state to be identified as having a mental health condition. Well, then constitutional carry doesn't mean anything anymore because you've also labeled everybody as having a mental disorder, which makes them a non-lawful weapons carrier.
Right.
And so it's the way that these insidious politicians do these things, and that they'll pitch it to you like they're giving you, a big tall glass of water in the desert, and completely ignore the fact that they're the ones that put you in the desert in the first place.
Yeah, folks. Go ahead, Representative Byrd.
Yes, so it's identifying methods to create pathways of care for our children, their physical, behavioral, and dental health care. I mean, everything to do with children that a parent should be taking care of, not government, and certainly not our schools.
Yeah, it's another giant step in the replacement of parents with the state. And folks, for those of you out there who think maybe some of these concerns might be overblown in terms of mislabeling people with mental health conditions, I want you to think of just some of the things that have happened just in the last couple of years. We had a doctor in Maine who expressed skepticism over the narrative around COVID and the vaccines and things, and she was subjected to a forced psychiatric evaluation. We had the president of the United States of America, Donald Trump, early on in his term. You had psychiatrists all across the country saying he must be insane. He must have a mental health disorder. We need to remove him from power. If you think they won't use this against conservatives or Christians or parents who don't want their children over medicated, you're kidding yourself, folks. This is so ripe for abuse. Representatives, we've got a few minutes left. I want to switch gears a little bit now because this is now going to the Georgia Senate. My guess is the reason it was able to sail through the House of Representatives so easily is because people are not paying attention. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I suspect the people of Georgia do not understand what's happening here. How can people in Georgia get involved in stopping this? And also for people in other states, how can they find out if this is happening in their state, and how can they get involved in trying to protect liberty and stop these kinds of bills from sailing through?
Well, I mean, I'll say this: don't wait for it to happen in your state.
Right.
You're in Florida. Everybody needs to be calling your congressman, your senator, your state reps, calling down here. I mean, the whole country. I don't know why Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson aren't talking about this bill on Fox News. I mean, everybody needs to be talking about this bill because Georgia, look, there's a reason it's happening in Georgia. And I don't know if anybody remembers the last 24 months, but Georgia is the epicenter of the political universe right now in the United States. We're going to be the epicenter with this upcoming election. We're going to be the ones that determine whether the Senate is a Republican or Democrat in the U.S. Congress. So there's a reason this bill is happening in Georgia. If it gets across the finish line in Georgia, it will be in all 50 states within the year. There's just no question that this is the model of government expansion. And unfortunately, I hate to tell you all this, but Republicans like to grow government oftentimes just as much as Democrats. And it's you guys that are the ones that are impacted by it, the people of this country. So that's what they got to do. They got to get involved. They got to share. We need some big media outlets to talk about it. We need some experts to write about it. We know our interpretation is correct, but it's an 80-page bill that has lasting implications.
And the thing is, it is emotional. We know that there is a mental health crisis in the United States. No one is denying that. What we are saying is over-medicalizing our children, over-medicating them, over-diagnosing them. That's not the answer. And when we talk about DSM-5, do remember that the team that created that, about 70% of them have direct ties to the pharmaceutical, Big Pharma. So that's ought to tell you everything you need to know about what we're mapping, what we're doing, and who's going to benefit from this. We just have been asleep at the wheel, but we also appeal to the emotions. Yeah, emotions sell, but that is not logical. We must apply logic.
Representative Byrd, any concluding remarks?
Yes, indeed. Certainly with the with inflation, the high cost of gas, groceries, we certainly do not need to add the additional cost of premiums of healthcare to everyone's policy because no one will be exempt.
Well, I just want to thank you guys so much for speaking out, for standing up in the face of this. And folks, I hope you'll take it real serious. I hope you'll share this out, send it to the people at Fox News, send it to your friends, send it to your legislators, your congressmen. Folks, if this gets through in Georgia, just like you just heard them say, it will move like lightning through your state legislature. I don't care if you're in a conservative state or Republican state. Georgia is supposed to be a conservative and a Republican state. Representative Sherri Gilligan, Representative Charlice Byrd, and Representative Philip Singleton, thank you once again for coming on. Thank you for sounding the alarm about this. We really appreciate it, and please keep us posted on what's going on.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much. All right, folks, you heard the representatives. Please get this out. You know the big tech social media companies don't want it to spread. It's up to you to make it happen. I'm Alex Newman. This is Conversations That Matter for the New American Magazine. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, God bless you all.